Assalamualaikum and very good day to Doctor and all my fellow friends. We are from the Tutorial 1 Group 1. We'll discuss about government policy and international trade. Here is our group members. The first one is me, MUHAIMIN. The second one is Farah. The third one is AZRINAH. The fourth one is SHAFIQAH, and the last one is SHAFIQAH. So now let's start with the critical thinking and discussion questions. So for the question 1, do you think government should consider human rights when granting preferential trading rights to countries? What are the arguments for and against taking such a positions? Yes, governments should consider human rights when granting preferential trading rights to countries. Arguments for considering human rights. First, ethical responsibility. Governments have a moral obligations to promote and uphold human rights. By tying trade benefits to human rights performance, countries can encourage better practice globally. Second is promotion of governance. As highlighted in the chapter, trade agreements can be tools to promote good governance and the rule of law. Conditioning trade on human rights can lead to more stable and transparent trading partners. Third is long-term stability. Countries that respect human rights often provide a more stable environment for trade and investment, reducing risks associated with political unrest or social upheaval. For the arguments against considering human rights, first is economic efficiency. Imposing human rights conditions may limit trade opportunities and economic growth, both for imposing country and its trading partners. Second is sovereignty concerns. Some argue that linking trade to human rights infringes on nations' sovereignty and may be viewed as imposing external values. The third one is potential for inconsistency. There is a risk of applying human rights standards inconsistently, possibly influenced by political or economic interests rather than genuine concerns for human rights.
Next question. Whose interest should be the paramount concern of government trade policy? The interests of producers, businesses and their employees, or those of consumers? Government trade policy often faces a choice. Should focus on helping producers or consumers. Supporting producers like business and workers, help protect local jobs, maintain strategic industry, and preserve specialized skills. For instance, Malaysia has protected the local auto industry and preserved thousands of jobs by providing import duties and subsidies to the local automaker, Proton. On the other hand, focusing on consumers provide benefits such as lower prices, more choices, and a higher standard of living. For instance, when Malaysia opened its market to imported goods like smartphones or clothing, consumers enjoy better quality products at cheaper prices. In the short term, government may need to support producers, especially during economic downturns or the development of new industries. But in the long term, trade policy should aim to support consumer welfare due to the fact that most people are consumers. Policies that lower prices and improve choices help drive economic growth, promote efficiency, and prevent monopolies, while producer support is important. But the primary goal of trade policy should be benefit to consumers. Government trade policy.
Thank you, Azrina. Now I will be discussing what kind of trade policy businesses should encourage government to adopt based on insights from the new trade theory and strategic trade policy. New trade theory shows that industries that expand early often dominate globally, not necessarily because they are more efficient, but because of economies of scale. Strategic trade policy builds on this by suggesting that government should support firms in this industry so they can be first to market, capture a large share, and deter future competition. Governments can offer subsidies, tax breaks, or low-interest loans to domestic firms, especially in high-tech or capital-intensive industry. This supports reduced production costs, allowing firms to compete with established global players and develop strong international market position. Emerging or infant industry often need time to grow and become competitive. Governments can provide temporary protection through tariff or quotas to shield them from foreign competition. This gives domestic firms the chance to develop, scale up, and gain experience before facing intense international rivalry. Another important form of trade policy support is investment in research and development, education, and infrastructure. These areas are critical for building innovation and long-term competitiveness. Firms benefit from public R&D funding and from having access to a skilled workforce and strong national infrastructure. Strategic trade policy also supports limited and selective protectionism. For example, in industry where a few large firms dominate and free competition is not realistic. In these cases, temporary trade barriers can help domestic firms survive and grow, but this must be carefully managed to avoid long-term inefficiencies and trade conflicts.
Hello everyone, I'm SHAFIQAH and today I will explain how a US computer company can respond to a trade challenge and what we can learn from it. Our company manufactures personal computer in Thailand because of its lower labor cost and skilled workforce. These products are then exported to the US and other countries around the world. Recently, the US government announced a 100% tariff on computer imported from Thailand. This is meant to punish Thailand for trade barriers that make it difficult for American companies to export goods there. This decision affects our business directly. One possible response is to relocate production to a different country such as Malaysia or Hong Kong, both of which were considered in the past. This would help the company avoid the heavy tariff and reduce costs. Another option is to increase sales to other countries outside the US, such as market in Europe or Asia. By doing this, the company can reduce its dependence on the US market and maintain its overall revenue. The company can also choose to work with US trade officials to explain how the tariff could hurt not only Thailand production but also American consumers and businesses that rely on affordable computers. If moving operations isn't practical, the company might invest in automation in Thailand. This could help lower production costs and make it possible to stay competitive even with the tariff in place. This situation teaches us an important lesson about trade barriers. While they are designed to pressure foreign government, they often end up affecting businesses on both sides. In this case, a US company is also impacted by a decision made by its own government. It also shows how political decisions can change business strategy overnight. That's why companies need to stay flexible and ready to adjust their operation quickly when new policies are introduced. So that's all for my part. I will pass to the next presenter.
Hello everyone, my name is Farah Liyana and I will be presenting question number 5. So for question number 5, read the management focus. Huawei export ban hits US firms. Is the US firm justified banning US companies or foreign semiconductor makers that use American-made production technology from doing business with Huawei? What are possible long-term implications of the policy? Who might benefit? Who might lose? What policy stance would you recommend to the Biden administration adopt with regard to this export ban? Let's start with a quick overview of the Huawei export ban. In 2019, the US government placed Huawei on the entity list, which means American companies were no longer allowed to sell products or services to Huawei without approval. Later on, in 2020, this ban was expanded to include foreign chipmakers like TSMC if they use US technology in their production. The main reason for this action was national security. The US believed that Huawei was involved in spying and had links to the Chinese government. This ban didn't just affect Huawei, it disrupted the global tech supply chain and impact companies around the world. Now, is the US justified in taking this action? From one side, it is yes. The US has the right to protect its national security. They feared that Huawei could be used by the Chinese government to spy or steal sensitive technology. Also, the ban was a strategic move to slow down China's growth in the tech sector, but on the other hand, the ban had some negative effects. It disrupted international trade and supply chains. American tech companies also lost a major customer, which affected their revenue. Some critics argue that the ban was more political than based on real evidence. So, the justification really depends on how you see the balance between national security and global trade. Let's look at the long-term effects. Some companies actually benefit from the ban. For example, US and European tech firms like Nokia and Ericsson may gain more market share. Chinese companies are also now focused on building their own tech without relying on the US. But many are also affected in a bad way, like American chipmakers who lost Huawei as a major client. The global supply chain is no longer as stable, and we can expect more fragmentation in the tech world. In the future, we might see a clear tech split. For example, one system led by the US and another by China. So, what should the US do moving forward? We recommended a balanced policy. The US should still protect national security, but allow limited trade with Huawei under strict regulation. At the same time, the government should support its tech industry by investing in local innovation and helping companies affected by the ban. Lastly, the US should work together with allies like the EU and Japan so that global tech standards can be aligned. This approach can reduce conflict, protect security, and keep global trade stable.
Now, for the second discussions, we will discuss about the case of America and Kenya negotiate a trade deal. First of all, let's start with the 10-point summary from the case. First is shift in US trade policy. In early 2020, the Trump administration pursued a free trade agreement FTA with Kenya, marking a shift from its usual protectionist stance. Second is geopolitical strategy. The deal was seen as a strategic move to counter China's growing influence in Africa and serve as a model for future US-Africa trade deals. Third is start of negotiations. Formal negotiations between the US and Kenya began in July 2020, aiming to establish the 15th US bilateral free trade agreement. Fourth is China's role in Africa. China has heavily invested in Africa infrastructure through its Belt and Road Initiative, leading to debt and concerns over neocolonialism. Fifth, US opportunities. Rising resentment towards China in Africa due to debt and racist incidents was seen by US officials as an opportunity to build stronger ties. Next is Kenya's appeals. Kenya is a regional economics leader with strong GDP growth, a young and tech-savvy population, and a solid education system. Next is limited current trade. Trade between the US and Kenya is modest $1 billion per year, so the deal is unlikely to significantly affect the US economy. Next is Kenya's interests. Kenya welcomed the deal, especially as the African Growth and Opportunity Act (AGOA), which benefits it, is set to expire in 2025. Next is unequal power dynamics. Concerns exist that the US, with a much larger economy, could dominate negotiations and push for terms favoring American interests. And last but not least, a conflict with AFCFTA. A bilateral deal might conflict with Kenya's commitment to the African Continental Free Trade Area (AFCFTA), though Kenya seems willing to proceed regardless.
Hi, my name is Farah and I will answering question number 1. What is China's interest in investing heavily in infrastructure projects in countries such as Kenya? What is China trying to achieve with its Belt and Road Initiative? Should American policymakers be concerned about China's action and intention here? So, why is China investing in Kenya infrastructure? China is investing in Kenya because Kenya is an important trade hub in Africa. China wants to use Kenya to reach other African countries. Africa also has many young people, so it's a big market for the future. By building roads and railways, China gets more power and stronger connection in the region. China's Belt and Road Initiative is a big global plan. It connects Asia, Africa and Europe in trade routes. China wants to lead world trade and make other countries depend on it. This also helps China compete with the US and gain more support from other countries. Next, should the US be worried? The answer is yes. The US should be worried. China is getting more power in Africa through big loans and projects. If the US does nothing, it may lose influence in important places like Kenya. China could also control more of world trade. That's why America must act now or fall behind.
Hello everyone, I'm Shafiqah and I will start by explaining who stands to benefit the most from a free trade deal between the United States and Kenya. When we look at it from an economic point of view, Kenya is likely to benefit more because a trade deal between the US would give Kenya better access to one of the largest markets in the world. That means Kenya can export more of its main product like clothing, coffee and fruits, which help the economy grow. Also, when a country like the US start trading more seriously with Kenya, it often attracts investors. This investment can lead to new businesses, more jobs and better productivity overall. Another plus is that Kenya could get access to new technology and higher standard in how goods are made, simply by working more closely with American companies. Now for the US, the impact would be pretty small. Kenya just isn't a major trading partner right now, so while it's good for political and strategic reasons, the economic gain for the US wouldn't be very noticeable. Now let's talk about who might lose out from this deal, and the main concern is actually on Kenya's side. The biggest risk is for small and local businesses. When trade open up with a much bigger economy like the US, it's usually the smaller players who feel the pressure first. These businesses may not have the resource or efficiency to compete with large American companies, especially in key industries like agriculture or manufacturing. There is also the issue of dependence. If Kenya becomes too reliant on trading with the US, any future change in US policy could hit the Kenya economy hard. That kind of one-side dependency is risky in the long term. And finally, Kenya is part of the biggest trade agreement with other African countries called AFCFTA. If Kenya sign a separate deal with the US, it might go against that agreement and create tension with its African neighbor, possibly a weakening effort to restore regional trade across the continent. So, would this trade deal be good or bad overall? From an economic perspective, I would say the net effect is likely to be positive, especially for Kenya. There are clear risks, but the potential benefits are bigger. With more export, more investment, and stronger trade links to a powerful economy, Kenya could take a big step forward in terms of development and global presence. The risks like harm to local businesses or tension with other African trade partners are real, but they can be managed through smart government policies and support systems. Even if the US doesn't gain much from this deal economically, the fact that Kenya could grow and modernize its economy means that the deal would likely to have a positive overall impact, particularly for Kenya. So that's all for my part. I will pass to the next presenter.
Next question. Will a free trade deal have geopolitical implications for the United States? What about Kenya? A free trade deal between the United States and Kenya will have important geopolitical effects. For the US, the deal is a way of countering China's influence in Africa. China has been investing heavily in African countries like Kenya, but this has caused them and distrust. The US wants to offer a better option and build stronger ties. Also, the US hopes the Kenyan deal can set a model for Africa, showing how future US-Africa trade agreements could work. Since Africa is growing fast, this deal will also help the US increase its presence in a region that will be very important in the future. For Kenya, the deal helps diversify its partnership, reducing over-reliance on China and Europe, especially with the US trade law, AGOA, which is African Growth and Opportunity Act, ending soon. It also helped bring economic investments such as in farming and manufacturing, helping Kenya grow. However, there are regional tension, where some African countries may feel that Kenya is putting US interests above the African Trade Agreement, AFCFTA. And lastly, there is a power imbalance, as the US economy is much more weaker, which could lead to a deal that mostly benefits America. So, while the deal has growth potential, Kenya must make sure its local industries and regional commitments are protected. A free trade deal between...
Thank you, Azrina. Now I will be discussing whether the US and Kenya should continue negotiating a free trade agreement, especially in light of the leadership change from Trump to Biden administration in 2021. From the US side, there are few reasons the Biden administration should move forward with the deal. First, it will promote mutual economic growth and give US firms greater access to East African markets. It aligns with broader US goals of supporting global trade, liberalization, and competitiveness. A deal will also strengthen strategic ties with Kenya and help the US maintain influence in Africa, especially as other powers like China increase their presence. Additionally, the agreement can include standards on labor rights and environmental protection, prioritized for the Biden administration. Overall, it will support the long-term goals of fair and open international trade. For Kenyan perspective, there are also strong reasons to continue pushing for this agreement. A trade deal will open up greater access to US markets for Kenyan goods, especially agricultural and textile export. It could attract more foreign direct investment and help develop local industry. The deal will also help Kenya diversify its trade relationship beyond traditional partners like EU or China. Kenya can negotiate to protect its emerging industry and ensure that local firms can grow under the deal. Lastly, this agreement will strengthen Kenya's role in global economy and support its long-term development goals. In conclusion, both the US and Kenya have much to gain from this free trade agreement.
That's all from our group. Thank you.